Welcome to Art with Alyssa. I am so happy you're here to paint with me. Since it's Easter time, I thought it would be fun to paint my favorite Easter candy, Cadbury Eggs. If you enjoyed this tutorial, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment what you'd like to paint next. In this video, we will do a simple sketch. We will use the wet on wet method, glazing, and some minor detailing. This is the perfect painting for any skill level. Let's get started. All right, so this painting is based off of this picture that I took of Cadbury Eggs. We're gonna start out with a sketch. So let's start out over here. We're gonna work left to right since I'm right-handed. And we're gonna space out this egg first. Draw really lightly just in case you need to erase. I'm gonna start with drawing in all of the eggs and then I'm gonna add their shadows. I just wanna make sure every egg is in the right place so that I can adjust as needed before I start adding all the shadows in. They're all going in different directions. Okay, I like that spacing. If you don't love the spacing of yours, go ahead and move the eggs around to where you want them. You can change the composition to be exactly how you want it. It's not precise. Just going through and refining all of my edges before I get started on the shadows. Okay, now let's start blocking in these shadows. So the light is coming from this direction in the photo. So all of the shadows are going to be cast going this way to the corner. So we'll start with this top one. Within the shadow, there's a darker part of it and then a lighter, more diffused part. So I'm just blocking in both of those. So it's almost like there's two shapes within the shadows. Okay, now on the actual eggs, we're gonna draw the highlight area and kind of the mid-tone area and the shadow. So we're just gonna block in right here is where the highlight is, where the light is shining. Then it's gonna go more medium, and then there's a shadow. And then right here, this very edge is where it's a little lighter, where the light is being bounced between the shadow and the egg. And I'll show you what I mean when we start painting. So we're just gonna draw all these shapes on the eggs. The main part is getting this shadow, and then we can kind of blur the line between. Since we're using the wet on wet method, this is going to be extremely easy. So you'll notice since these eggs are all going in different directions, the light, this highlighted area, is different shapes on each egg. So in order for it to look as realistic as possible, we have to follow the lights and the shadows the best we can. This will help make them look as 3D as possible. Okay, it's all blocked in. Now let's go ahead. I'm gonna take my kneaded eraser. If you don't have one, you can just lightly rub the pencil to lighten it up. I'm just gonna take my kneaded eraser, which is this gray stretchy eraser. It's awesome for watercolor because you can just dab it on your picture and it will lift some of the pencil up. So with watercolor, it's semi-transparent, and so when we start painting, you can see all of your pencil lines on, like, especially on the light parts. So we want to get rid of that as much as we possibly can. Okay, let's get to the fun part. All right, let's start with the yellow eggs, which are these two right here and here. So we're gonna start with a base layer, and we always start from lightest to darkest. So we're gonna start with this lemon yellow. And with watercolor, the more water you add, the lighter of a color you're gonna get. The more paint you add, the more pigment, the more vibrant or dark the color will be. So I'm gonna add some water so we can get a really light yellow, because we want the first layer to start with the light parts of the egg. So just go ahead and paint in your egg for now with the base layer of the lemon yellow. And go ahead and do that on both of them. Since these are small, we can manage to do 2 at a time. Okay, so if your watercolor is pooling up anywhere at this point, so you can see if you see that there's like a pool of water, you're going to want to just brush off your paintbrush and just kind of soak up that pool. We want a really flat, even layer. All right, now let's go ahead and mix this shadow and the more vibrant middle part where it transitions from the light to the dark. So I'm gonna get my cadmium yellow. I'm gonna set that aside and I'm gonna mix a little bit of the lemon yellow with it, just so it's not quite as bright as a straight cadmium yellow. Okay, I'm just gonna add a little bit more paint so that the pigment is brighter. That's a little too dark, so I'm gonna add more of this lemon. Perfect. Okay, and then we're gonna go ahead and mix the shadow color. With shadows, we do not want to use black or gray because if you use these, it is going to dull your paint. What we want to do instead is use the color on the opposite side of the color wheel, so the complementary color. The complementary color of yellow is purple. So if you have purple, you can go ahead and pull that out, or it's super easy to just go ahead and mix some ultramarine blue and some cadmium red to get a nice purple. Okay, So we've got that shadow color and we have that mid color. So let's go ahead and take that mid color, and while it's wet, we're going to go ahead and put that in. Just in the middle, where that transition goes from the middle to the shadow side. With the wet on wet method, it will just blend, which is awesome, so that you can get smooth transitions. I'm gonna switch to a smaller brush. This is a size 3, but whatever small brush you have will work great. We're gonna go ahead and mix this shadow, or we're gonna apply the shadow. Right there. So don't go right up to the edge. We want to leave a little bit of yellow right here so that we can get that reflected light. Okay, we'll do the same over here. You have to work fairly quickly because the wet on wet method only works if the first layer is wet. Okay, I'm gonna take just a little bit more of this mid yellow color, and I'm just gonna apply it between the transition, or for the transition between the light and the shadow side. Okay, you'll notice my shadow is starting to move where I don't want it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and tear off a little piece of this paper towel, and I'm gonna soak that part up just by dabbing it. And right here it's pooling up where I don't want it, so I'm just gonna soak that up a little bit too. Perfect. And this edge is going a little skiwampus. So I'm just gonna soak that up. All right, let's go ahead and let that dry before we start glazing on it and adding more layers to bring up the vibrancy. Let's start working on, let's do the white eggs right here and here. So we never use white paint for white colors on watercolor because it muddies the pigments. So instead, we'll just use water, and for the shadows, we're gonna use kind of the same mixture. We're gonna use that ultramarine blue, so I'm gonna make a little bit more, and some cadmium red. Okay. All right, let's rinse off our brush. We're gonna go ahead and wet that whole egg with water. This one as well. Okay, there's a little bit of pooling on this one, so I'm just gonna go ahead and soak that up with my brush, wipe it off. Again, we're going for a very flat layer. With the water spread evenly. Okay, let's go ahead and start putting in our shadow. Okay, now I'm gonna mix just a little bit more blue in with it. Remember, more paint, less water makes a more vibrant color. So I'm actually gonna switch to my smaller brush. I'll add in a little bit darker of a shadow. Okay, let's just let that dry now. All right, let's move on to the pink eggs. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna use a little bit of my rose color. This is the most beautiful pink. I love this color. And we're gonna add quite a bit of water to it to make it more of a pastel color. I'm gonna add just a little bit of some cadmium red, which is more warm toned, to this color so that the eggs are a little more warm. Okay, and these three are the pink ones. So let's just start with the base layer of this pink. Nice and light for the first layer. Remember, always work lightest to darkest. Okay. Now we're just gonna soak up any pooling to get that even layer once again. Okay, now let's make that shadow. So we're gonna use a little bit more of these colors, more pigment. And then for the shadow, let's use a little bit of green. Let's use Viridian green since it's more cool toned. These shadows are all more cool toned, so we want to use more cool toned colors, complementary colors for the shadows. Okay, I don't want to do straight up green because that's going to look very unnatural. So I'm going to add some pink to it. And you'll see it kind of just mutes the color. A little bit of red. Okay, perfect. All right, so we have our colors ready. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. Let's go ahead and add in this medium color, this mid-tone. And then we're going to add in that shadow. So you'll quickly see that by using complementary colors, it gives you a way more beautiful color that's more natural than using gray or black. We want to avoid those colors as much as possible in watercolor because they will muddy your paints. Okay, I'm gonna take this vibrant color back in and kind of use it to transition. Again, this is your first layer, so don't be too worried about what's happening. Watercolor is pretty simple to fix, especially on the first layers when you're going light. All right, let's start on these blue ones next. Okay, so the blues, let's use this cerulean blue. Cerulean blue is perfect for sky, blue skies. It's more of like a warm toned blue. So we're gonna use a little bit of that, and then we're gonna mix a little bit of this cobalt blue with it, just to make it a little more cool toned. Then we'll add water. To get a really nice light pastel blue. Okay, let's start on that first layer. All right. Once again, if there's any pooling, go ahead and soak it up at this time and wipe it off. Okay, now let's make the shadow. For the shadow, let's use the complementary color of blue is orange. So let's get some of this bright orange. I'm gonna go for more of an orangey red. And then I'm gonna go ahead and take my ultramarine blue and mix it in with that. So using complementary colors, once again, just mutes the color. So I'm adding more blue so that it's more cool toned. Like I said, these shadows are very cool toned. We want to keep it all cohesive. Okay, and then we're going to make a brighter blue, which is just the same, this color, the cobalt blue and cerulean blue, just more pigment. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to switch to my smaller brush. Take that bright blue. And then we'll do the shadow. Then I'm going to go between the shadows, the shadow and the highlight. Okay, we have the first layer. Now what you're going to want to do is let this all dry. You do not want to work on these eggs until it's completely dry with the glazing or with the shadows, because if we do that, it'll bleed into it and it's gonna mess up the whole first layer. So let's just let this completely dry and then we'll keep working on it. Okay, so the way you know if it's dry is if you touch it and it's not cold to the touch. If it's still cold, that means it's still a bit damp. So it seems like these two yellow ones are pretty much dry. So I can go ahead and start working on them. What we're gonna do is start glazing. So glazing is just using semi-transparent layers on the first layer where we're brightening it up and brightening up the shadows, just adding another layer so that it looks more 3D. So let's go ahead and get this lemon yellow. And then we're gonna mix some cadmium yellow. And we'll add water so that it will be somewhat transparent. Okay, I'm just gonna start on this shadow so we can get a feel for how dark that color is. Then we can blend out from there. Okay, then I'm gonna dip my brush in the water and I'm going to glaze it out. I actually want to add just a little bit more lemon yellow on this highlight just to brighten it up. Take more of this cadmium yellow mixture and bring it back on the shadow. And you can rework the edges at this point to make it just the way you want it. Sometimes it dries different than you expect it to. Okay, and then I'm gonna take that lemon yellow and just bring that on the bounced highlight right here. Okay, let me just refine these edges. Then we'll move on. You can see this already looks way more 3D than this and way more bright and vibrant. So let's go ahead and work on this one next. So we're just going to do the same thing. Let's start with glazing on the shadow. You can see the shape of this one went really wonky, so we'll fix this while we're working on it. I'll dip my paintbrush in the water and then just move that color out with the water. Let's add some lemon yellow on that highlight. Again, kind of just reworking those edges to be just the way we want it. And then we're going to bring that lemon yellow on this bounced highlight. I'm just going to bring a little bit more of this bright color back onto the shadow just to reinforce that contrast. Okay, we'll let that dry and we can rework whatever we need to. All right, these white eggs feel dry. So let's go ahead and work on these ones next. So we used ultramarine blue and cadmium red. That's a little too red. Let's add a little more blue. A little bit more because we do want it more cool toned. Okay, great. Okay, then we'll go ahead and start glazing this on the shadow just a bit more. Dip the water in the brush and we'll just blend it out. So I'm going right up against what I just painted. Just moving the paint around. Then I'm just going to keep dipping it in the water and we'll just bring it all the way around. So the whole thing is wet so that we don't have any weird drying. Then I'm going to do the same on this edge right here. We don't want that hard edge, so I'm just going to take water to it and blend it out. So again, kind of just reinforcing the shape that we want. Okay, we'll do the same thing over here. Start with the shadow. Dip it in the water and take it right up against the edge and blur that line. Keep dipping it in the water and bring it all the way around. Now let's diffuse this edge right here. Take our shadow back in. Make sure it's exactly where we want it. Okay, let's let that dry. Now the pinks are dry, so let's work on those next. So if you remember, we made a green, or we used some green. That's right, we used some green and mixed it with some red and pink. Just to get a more muted color. I'm just gonna add a little bit more pink. Okay, now let's go ahead and apply that where the shadow is. Let's make a little bit more of this pink, this bright pink. We're mixing the cadmium red with the rose. Okay, and we're gonna take that to this edge right here. Then we're gonna dip it in the water and just move this around so that it's smoothly transitioning. We'll do that right up against here with the pink. add a little bit more of a shadow in there while it's wet. And a little bit more pink in that transition. If there's any pooling, once again, you can just kind of dab it with a paper towel. Okay, we'll do the same thing on this egg. Apply that shadow. Taking water against that edge to smooth it out. Then we'll take pink to the opposite end. Okay, you'll see this pink kind of is bleeding out, so just dab that. Again, if there's any pooling, you can just dab it up. Okay, we'll work on this one now. So taking that shadow, take some pink, and then just some water and smooth it out. Fix the edges where needed. So I'm just dabbing up any pooling or bleeding that's happening. If colors are going where you don't want them to go, just lightly soak it up. Okay, let's work on the blues now. So for this shadow, we used some orange, a little too much, and some ultramarine blue. We want it really cool toned, so make sure the blue overpowers the orange. Perfect, then we'll take this cobalt blue and this cerulean blue and mix that mid-tone color. All right, let's start with the shadow. Take that mid-tone blue, right up against the edge. I'm just doing 2 at a time. Rinse off your brush and just take that water to the edge, softening that edge, and bring it all the way out to cover the rest of the egg. And take that bright blue again and do it on the opposite end. Great, now we'll just let that dry. I'm gonna check on the yellows since those are the first ones I did. Feels like this one is dry. So let's go ahead and start on the shadows. Okay, for the shadows, we're gonna mix this ultramarine blue. And if you don't have a spot on your palette, you can go ahead and clear off a spot. I'm actually just gonna use this area because the colors are very similar. So I'm gonna use this ultramarine blue and I'm gonna mix in my burnt sienna. So this is a very orangey brown color. It's one of my favorite colors to use. So you're gonna mix it until you get kind of a warm gray color. Actually, just kind of a neutral gray. Okay, and then we're gonna make another pile right here with a little bit more of the burnt sienna and just a tiny bit of the ultramarine blue. So this side is just gonna be a little bit more brown. More gray on this side, so there's more blue. This side is more brown, so a little bit more burnt sienna than blue. Okay, then what we're gonna do is we're just gonna go ahead. Actually, I'm gonna switch to the smaller brush because I'm gonna go right up against this edge right here. We're just gonna wet that entire shadow with water. So once again, we're using the wet on wet method. Okay, then we're gonna start with this cool blue gray color. We're just gonna do it right up against this edge. And then where this line is, this is kind of the dark part. Then we'll dip our paintbrush in the water and we'll switch to this warmer brown color. And we're gonna bring this kind of between the transition between these two and then right up against the edge of the entire thing. Then we'll just let that dry. We'll do another layer on the shadow in a bit so that we can really push the darks. Let's go ahead and do this one. So same thing, we'll start with this darker blue-gray right up against the edge of, oh, whoops. We're actually, let's wet this whole thing with water first. Make sure there's no pooling. Okay, now we'll take that gray color right up against the edge and then a little ways out. So there's a little gap between. And then we'll paint that burnt sienna, warmer brown color in between. And along the entire edge. Okay, we'll have to fix this later. I'll show you how to do that. There's just a little bit of pooling, so I'm gonna wipe that up. Okay, the white eggs feel dry, so we'll do the same thing there. Oops, start with water. Use this blue-gray. I just need a little bit more, so I'm gonna mix some more real fast. We're taking that warm color between the two areas where it's gray and then right along the entire edge. Okay, this one feels a little more cold, so I think that one needs to dry longer. I'm gonna work on this one first. Do the same thing right here. Take that warm brown between and around. Okay, now we'll do this last one. So we're just gonna dip our water in, our brush in the water. Do the gray right up against that edge. And that ring that goes around. The reason why we're using two colors is to get some variety in the shadows. We want some warm and cool, kind of muted colors in the shadows. Okay, great. Now while we wait for these shadows to dry, some of them are already dry. The yellow ones are already dry. I'm actually gonna do just one more layer on the yellows. You can see they look a little bit more flat than say the blue ones and the white ones. The white ones actually look finished, but I would say the blue one or the yellow ones could use just another layer of shadowing. So we're gonna mix that yellow with kind of that gray color, which we made with the blue, ultramarine blue, and some cadmium red. So remember, we're making a purple using blue and red, and then we're mixing some yellow in with it. We'll use that lemon yellow, some cadmium yellow. Take it right up against the edge. Dip your brush in the water and just smooth the rest out with water. Then we'll take that yellow to the opposite edge. So make sure that your shadows are dry, otherwise you're gonna get yellow in your shadows. Okay, this pink one feels dry. These two are a little bit wet still, so we'll wait on those. But we can do just one more layer on these ones. Actually, I'm gonna wait on this one. Okay. And if your eggs already have as much contrast as you want, then you can go ahead and leave them as is. I just want mine to just have a little bit more contrast. Let's do this last pink egg. Start with the shadow, add that bright pink along the edge, and then blend out with water. And then take the pink to the opposite edge. Wipe up any pooling. All right, these are all about as 3D as I want them to be. So now I'm just going to add some speckles on them. So I'm just going to use this burnt sienna because these eggs have some orangey brown speckles on them. So I'm going to use the burnt sienna and I'm just going to add the slightest bit of blue to it, ultramarine blue. Just to neutralize it. And I'm actually going to switch to my smallest brush at this point. So just a small detail brush is great. You're just going to use the tip to add some speckles, just kind of randomly where you want them. Just going to add a little bit more burnt sienna. And then I don't want them looking so cartoon. So I'm just gonna use my paper towel to just wipe them up so they're kind of more faded on the eggs. So we still want to be able to see them, but we don't want them to be totally distracting. Okay, then I'm gonna take this white. So this is Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. This is the only time I use white and it's for detailing near the end. So I'm done with the eggs. I'm just gonna add some white to the highlighted area for some speckling. And I don't do this on all of my paintings, just certain ones. So I'm just gonna use my detail brush and just speckle this on the highlighted area. What it's gonna do is just add a little bit more of a texture. And then I'm also going to use it on the edges just to soften any hard edges. But only on the highlight side. Okay. The final layer we are going to do is just on the shadows. You can see the shadows still look kind of flat compared to the eggs. So just gonna take our little detail brush. Actually, let's make a big pile of, this ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. So we're trying to get that gray color. And we'll do that pile of mostly burnt sienna with a little bit of ultramarine blue to get that neutral brown color. Now we're gonna take that gray. I think all of the eggs are dry at this point, so we can start wherever. Since I'm right-handed and I don't want to smear, I'm gonna start at the top left. I am just gonna go right into it. So the glazing method. So we want to get a stark, dark line for this shadow right here. We're also going to reinforce that ring that's going to go around. Dip our brush in the water and we're going to pick up this color. Bring it right up against the edge. And I'm going to bring this right along the edge of what I just did. I'm going to dip it in the water and then I'm just going to diffuse it out with just water. And the reason why I'm doing this is just to get a really soft edge. Great, let's do the next one. Okay, dip your brush in the water and then with just water, take it along the entire edge to get a soft edge. If there's any pooling, you can just dab up the color. And just take water along the edge of all of these. Now we'll just let that dry. We can brighten some of the areas with a paper towel. Then we're just gonna go right in there with that dark color and only go right up against the edge. This is just to show that the egg is sitting on a table. Now we'll just use a little bit of water, and once again, just diffuse that edge just a little bit, just with water. And then we're gonna do the same thing right along the outer edge, except we're just gonna rub back and forth so that the edge can be way more soft. So you can see there's kind of these hard lines. It's just the nature of watercolor. So if we want a soft edge that kind of disappears, we just have to rub back and forth on those areas and then wipe it with a paper towel. Gives you way more of a natural edge. Okay, you can definitely see the difference between these two. These two to all of the rest. These look way more natural. All right, so the last thing I'm gonna do is refine the shapes. So you can see there's like gray sticking out here. Some of the eggs look a little like there's paintings kind of in places that it shouldn't be. This egg has the shadow on the egg, so it's making it have a little divot. So these are just the last finishing touches, and you're gonna use the same method where you just dip the brush in the water and then you rub back and forth to remove the paint in the areas where you don't want it, and then wipe it. So you can especially do this on the edge that is right against the shadow, because then you can get that reflected light back a little bit better. One more. And then this edge is kind of sticking out more than I'd like, so I'm just gonna try and remove that paint right here. If it's too light, then you can go ahead and glaze on top of it. Perfect. Okay. And there we have it. We have our Cadbury eggs. Let's go ahead and remove our tape. And you can sign it in the bottom right hand corner if you'd like. And here's the final result. Thanks for painting with me today. Want more watercolor tips, tricks, and tutorials? Hit subscribe and check the link below to join the waitlist for my watercolor collective, your VIP pass to all of my tutorials. Catch you in the next one.